Hello, guten Tag und grüß Gott. Today is February the 1st, 2020. 1 month of this year is already gone. Amazing. So this is my first, at least I hope it'll be one of the first public available vlogs or vlogs that I'm going to produce over the next, for as long as I may be able to do it. So my channel is called Newswit. So I will introduce myself as Newswit. So I was thinking about why am I so driven to do a video blog and put it out there for public consumption. And I really don't have the greatest of answers for that because, it's something that kind of comes from within and you kind of want to do it. But I'm thinking that maybe I just want to tell a story. Perhaps I'm a good storyteller. And so I'm going to keep on telling stories, stories of my life, stories of things that I've experienced, and also opinions about what's going on today. So even though today is February the 1st, I want to take you back a little bit into yesterday, because yesterday was, according to my calendar, my historical calendar, it was the execution of Guy Fawkes in 1606. It was 1606. Guy Fawkes is the guy that was trying to blow up the British Parliament, and he and three co-conspirators were executed on January 31st in 1606. So it's kind of interesting, that here is a guy that was trying to blow up Parliament, and the Brits have celebrated Guy Fawkes Day ever since. And they decided that November 5th is the time for a celebration for Guy Fawkes Day. So, it's a little bit odd for me to think about celebrating the day that a criminal plot was foiled. I guess, you could look at it from that standpoint. On the other hand, it's always that Guy Fawkes has to come up, and so we're celebrating once is that the plot failed. British Parliament did not blow up. But Guy Fawkes' name keeps coming up, and they call it Guy Fawkes Day, and I guess it gives a chance for the Brits to celebrate. So I just want to mention that ever since Don Henley wrote a song and was singing about the bubble-headed bleach blonde on the news, give me something I can use, I want dirty laundry. I kind of disrespected people, especially, I have to say, the bubble-headed bleach blonde, as he was talking about. And it turns out that Don Henley may have parodied the newscaster and so forth, but it turns out that if you want to speak into a camera or want to have some sort of a dialogue with a television camera, movie camera, etc. In this case here, of course, it's the iPhone 11 that I'm having this dialogue with, and I can see myself, just to the right of where I'm looking at right at this moment, because I think I'm looking straight into the camera. Anyway, I just want to tell people who haven't done this is really a difficult thing to do, and to lambast a newscaster. So anybody that gets up in front of a camera and starts speaking is doing them a bit of disservice, because it takes quite a bit to be able to carry on a conversation and still be kind of coherent about things. So with that, I want to change my calendar, and well, maybe I need to just say one more thing about blowing up the British Parliament, because the big news stories right now is that, as a matter of fact, I'm going to hold that up, is that Brexit arrives, a watershed moment for Britain and the EU. I'm going to hold up the Wall Street Journal for that purpose. So you see that as a headline, and you can see it kind of behind me. Anyway, so what you just saw were three things that were really significant. The Senate rejects witnesses in the trial. Now, the trial that we're talking about is the Senate trial of Donald Trump. And it was the Democrats, the Democrat majority in the Congress, that impeached the president, which means that they brought articles of impeachment to the Senate in order to have the trial. And as it turned out, the Democrats, the majority House, they were able to vote through and articles of impeachment, and there were basically two articles of impeachment. One was the abuse of power, which they wanted to basically attack the executive privilege, because they accused Trump of abuse of power by stymieing Congress from requesting records and having people testify that might have had something bad to say about the president. And there are some really significant arguments on both sides of this particular issue. Was the president just being obstinate, and did he abuse his power by telling his people not to speak to the Democrats and so forth, and to withhold documentation, because he considered this always in his words, a total witch hunt. And from my perspective, it really did look this way. The Democrats finally had the majority in the House, and ever since 2016, when Trump was elected, they wanted to impeach the president. So the impeachment is still a big story, and the reason the headline says Senate rejects the witnesses in trial is because the Democrats have always said, we have proven this case for impeachment against the president 100%, beyond any, not just beyond a reasonable doubt, but beyond any doubt, according to Jerry Nadler. I watched him actually say that. And then they say, oh, no, but we would still want to have some witnesses, because there's John Bolton out there that is publishing a book, and he says that he heard the president say, go out there and make sure that the president of the newly elected prime minister of the Ukraine does an investigation into Biden's and corruption of the Ukraine, and how they may have interfered with Trump's election in American politics. Anyway, so the Democrats were stunned by the fact that Trump won the presidency in 2016. And of course, I think we were all a little bit stunned by that, because everyone expected Hillary Clinton to win. And as the polls came in, it turned out, that while both the East Coast and the West Coast and the major cities, which are all in Democratic hands, and they basically voted for Hillary Clinton, but the rest of the country, the other half, just a little bit more than half, quite a bit more than half when you count the votes in the Electoral College. So each state, of course, is always won by if a majority in the state wins Democratic, then the electoral college has to vote Democratic and so forth. Well, I'm not going to get into this because that's something that I think everybody knows, except maybe some foreigners that might be interested in American politics and speak English. And if they do speak English, my God, they already know all about America. Because and when I grew up in Germany, we knew more about America, than people in the heartland of America, as I found out when I came to the United States back in the 50s, late 50s. And I was talking to my fellow students as I entered high school. I actually, I was pretty much up to date, and some of them didn't really care that much about what's happening in the country. After all, they just won the war, World War II, and life was good. And, the economy was good. And so rock and roll started, so everybody felt good. Elvis Presley, yeah. Well, anyway, that happened back in 1956, and I guess Elvis Presley had been around since 1954, maybe 53 or something like that. I don't really know. Let me get back to this being Saturday, February the 1st, 2020. And one interesting thing is that February the 2nd, the Brush Electric Light Company of Cleveland installed the first electric street lights in Wabash, Indiana. That's kind of interesting, and a month later, the city paid to have 4 more streetlights installed. So that just happened in 1880, and it's so now 120, 140 years ago. So it's not that long. People are living longer, and there's somebody in Japan right now that just celebrated its, I think it's a woman, 118th birthday. So, anyway, getting back to why I'm doing this perhaps a little bit, I thought that there's something in me that thinks that I can leave a legacy that's of some importance to somebody, and I'm not sure whether that's actually the reason I'm doing that. I think I should, maybe I, there's just a few things. I love to tell a story, or I love to tell stories. And I also have great regrets about not recording more of my parents' stories and even my grandparents, because I knew my grandfather, when I could have at least written down. I was already conscious. I was, I think he died when I was approximately, I don't know, 9 or 10 years old or so. So I could have asked him more about stuff that I did. And then, of course, my parents, who died in the 80s, and my mom died in the 90s. I should have, and I do have some recordings, but really not much. And I wish I had done that, what I'm trying to do now. But I think overall, I kind of hope to entertain, and I'm going to make what's current in the news as my main focus, because after all, this is Newswit. So let me get back to blowing up the British Parliament, which is interesting because the Brexit has arrived, and it's a watershed moment for the Britain and the EU. Now, what's interesting about that is, to me, is that the Brits actually decided that they want to leave the EU. That's kind of like almost like a secession of the states back in 1862 in the United States. Now, of course, nobody's mustering an army right now to coerce the Brits getting back in the EU. But since the EU has been established, and we think it was kind of a little bit modeled after the United States establishment, and so they wanted to have a European states. They even adapted a European language, which is English. So that's the main language in Europe. So there's just one more thing that I would like to say about the Brexit. How ironic is it that the EU adopts English as the official language of the EU, and now the English are leaving the EU. So I would imagine that now the French are going to have the big voice, and they're going to say, yes, we knew it all along. You should have adopted French as the official language of the EU. It's going to be really interesting how all that plays out. And it's not the American English, it's the British English, because as I've been told some time back that the kids are going to pick up the American English easy, but we're going to teach them the British English. So the Europeans sounding more like Brits. And of course, once they get on the internet, then they're starting to sound more like Americans. And it's easily understood, but we do have some idioms and some differences in how we say things and how we pronounce stuff. But I think it's primarily dialectical in nature, because we can clearly understand each other, and we can still say that American English is English and British English is still also English. So the big stories of today, and I'm going to try to limit this vlog to about 20 minutes. But the big stories, of course, I've already touched on the Brexit. But then there is the coronavirus, which originated in China, in the Wuhan province. Well, actually, Wuhan city, and I'm not sure what the province is, but by now, that's been now going on for a couple of weeks or so. And some 200 people have already died, and maybe more, because sometimes we don't really know what kind of truth is coming out of China. They're a very fairly close society when it comes to disseminating information, but I kind of have a feeling that they really don't want to hide anything, because hiding information always becomes an embarrassment. Just like very recently, Iran, when they were lobbing some missiles at American installations in Iraq, they had they shot down by accident a Ukrainian airliner. So at first they said, "Oh no, that wasn't us. It's probably some American plot and whatnot," and then they had to come clean and say, two missiles, because there were videos from the ground that kind of pretty much proved the fact, that the airline took a couple of hits, and I don't know, 156 people died. But it's again interesting. Ukraine, bordering Russia, and actually Ukraine means border, so the Ukraine. And I'm not sure what the huge difference is between Ukraine and Russia. And I think they're kind of like the Brits and Americans. I think they understand each other. But now I'm not really speaking from a high ground of knowledge. So take that as you will. The interesting, though, that we're talking about the Ukraine interfering in the elections and Trump wanting to use the Ukraine for to expose the Biden's misdeeds, if there are any, which we don't really know at this time, because the Obama and his administration, and the leftover of the Obama administration in the National Security Agency and the FBI, they claim to have cleared the Bidens of any wrongdoing, and so the Democrats are running with that as fact, that the Bidens are innocent, and Trump is just using the involvement in Burisma of Hunter Biden Joe Biden holding or threatening to hold up aid to the Ukraine if they don't fire a corrupt attorney, or I guess it was the main attorney, and I'm fishing for a word right now, which I don't have, but it's like the adjutant general, maybe, I don't know. Anyway, he was the main prosecuting attorney that was looking into the wrongdoing of Burisma, and then the world decided that hey, this guy is corrupt in Ukraine, and so he needs to be fired, and Biden ran with that. But the whole story looks a little bit fishy because, Hunter Biden being on the board of Burisma, making a few $1,000,000, and clearly, the fact that his dad was the vice president had something to do with this. But of course, Trump jumped on that and tried to make it, tried to at least give it some legs, because if there is an investigation in the Bidens, and Joe Biden is running for president, that can't be good for him, that's for sure. And of course, Trump knew that. Now this has become, soliciting foreign interference has become the second article of impeachment for the Democrats. So it's kind of a screwy thing. I don't know whether this rises to the level of impeachment. Not in my mind, but clearly there was something going on with the Bidens, and the Russians said that Ukraine also tried to interfere with the election on the behalf of the Clintons. By putting out disinformation on the internet, that we stupid voters, are falling for, and my problem with all that information is, do we stupid voters want to fall for the Democrats' narrative? When you look at all the big cities that are in the hands of Democrats, and they've got nothing but huge problems with homelessness, huge problems with crime. And so, I'm thinking, do I really want to be ruled by Democrats that are soft on crime, want to open our borders, want to tax the shit out of all of us? Anyway, so that's the big story. And we'll just those are the big stories right now. Just to summarize, it's the Senate trial of the impeachment trial of Donald Trump, the coronavirus originating in China. And you got to wonder, why in the hell all this, every time we have some sort of a thing that is, a pandemic or near a pandemic, it comes from China. The swine flu, SARS, and some others. What the hell are these people doing over there to contract those viruses and spreading it to each other? It's kind of strange. As a matter of fact, if you reach back into history, and the Black Plague and the Black Death, which decimated Europe back in 14th century, where the hell did that come from? Guess what? It came from China in that area. So, it arrived in the rats on a ship that landed someplace in Italy, maybe Genoa or someplace. And all of a sudden people start dying, with those buboes on their face and skin and so forth. And that was horrible because I think in Europe, more than 5 million people just died of the Black Death, which before it kind of ran its course. And I don't know how these pandemics actually run their course. So that's something to be studied. In any case, I think for my first public vlog, this is probably sufficient information out there. In that case, I will bid you farewell. Auf Wiedersehen.